beyond 3D.
Good evening, everybody out there in Radio Land. Welcome to this edition of Beyond 3D. Matt is here with Clint. How's it going this week, Clint?
Unfortunately, you're locked in here with me. I'm not in here with you.
Yeah, well, that's life, and sometimes it's really interesting. So, what are you going to do? Welcome, guys, to this edition of Beyond 3D. It's a pretty special edition because we're coming to you live from the RPFM 98.7 and 98.3 studios here in beautiful Victoria on the Mornington Peninsula.
It amazes me how you can wax lyrical like that and just multitask and do 5 or 6 things at once while having a normal conversation. I'm watching you in amazement doing this, and it's just blowing my mind.
What are you going to do?
We have a special guest tonight.
Yeah, we do.
But we'll get to him later.
Yeah, we will.
Because that's why he's a special guest.
Exactly. But what are you going to do? This is what we're here for. We're here to talk about this week a little bit of a conversation on a topic that's near and dear to a lot of people's hearts, especially in this country known as Australia. And that is about a thing that's stuck out in the middle of nowhere near the Alice, or semi-close to the Alice, and it's called...
Ayers Rock?
No. Catajuda? No.
No.
Pine Gap.
Pine Gap.
Absolutely, and it's an interesting topic to discuss.
Now, we came up with this conversation, I think from memory it was at least 12 months ago we had this conversation, and our special guest tonight just happened to wander into the middle of it, and he is a font of knowledge on the subject.
Well, he's been out that way and knows a little bit about it.
Yes, he does.
Yeah, so that's what we're going to get into and talk to him about what actually may go on out there. A lot of people don't know. There's a lot of rumors, a lot of innuendo, but we'll see if we can dig into that and uncover what's really going on out there.
Can we step to the left just a little?
Left just a little? I don't know about that.
You asked me today about what I thought about a particular piece of footage that you put on Facebook.
Okay, guys, everybody listening out there, do yourself a favor. Go to our Facebook page right now, and what is up there is El Bueno Radio. There's a video up there of an interesting little flying saucer that was caught over a highway. Looks like, what is it, sunrise? It looks like to me, anyway. And it's a very interesting video. And I asked Clint, who has a little bit of a background in CGI and video and things along those lines, for his opinion on this video. So I want you guys to go to our Facebook page, Beyond 3D's Facebook page. Take a look down at El Bueno Radio from the 1st of March 2015 and look at that video.
You literally posted it 13 hours ago, so if anybody's looking for it.
Yeah. It's got a few views already, but take a look at that and tell us what you think. And you can do that by just commenting on the Facebook page as well.
9 million.
It's a lot of hits.
9
it's a
million.
lot of views when you look at something like that. But the actual video is amazing. What I'm going to do is show it to our guest here in the studio so they can take a look at it. Yeah.
I'll slide it across to
So slide it across so that can be watched. And it's...
Hang on, give me 1 sec, hang on.
It's fascinating little piece of footage. And quite frankly, if it is CGI, I will tell you right now, whoever created that literally needs to be working in the movies in that industry, because it is a brilliant job of video footage. It's amazing.
You're going to take me off the chain?
What do you mean?
I'll go on.
Go for it.
Okay.
Please.
I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of UFO footage over the years.
Mm-hmm.
This particular piece is exceptional. Exceptional because it's not so much a... Look, if it was going to be a CGI piece of footage, it would not have as much detail in it as it does.
Right.
I stopped the frames for you tonight and showed you little people. Oh, that's the last time he comes back in here again.
Tell me about it.
Who invited you? Where was I? No,
frame by frame.
I stopped frame by frame for you tonight, and you saw the detail that was in there that didn't need to be in there.
Right.
Just a millisecond little piece of detail here and there, and the physics of it and the way that it moves across the sky, it's very flat. If I was a CGI expert, and I'm not, as in I can't produce that quality of work. That's industrial light and magic type stuff. But I don't think the way it passes across the sky, I think if something like that was made at Industrial Light and Magic, there'd be a lot more flair to it, a lot more sound effects. There's no sound effects to this. It creates a little hum as it passes over the car, and that's it.
Right.
But the end part of that footage, Matt, where
yeah.
that giant ship just blurts into them, it sort of like teleports into the middle of
Literally,
the screen. It's mind-blowing.
I think so. I looked at it and I was like, wow. It's almost like it just tore a rip in space, appeared, the other ship goes up, and boom.
If I was going to play devil's advocate and go, okay, this is totally fake. How did this guy fake this? Okay.
Good point.
Okay, how would you fake something like that? I don't think you could to the standard that is. Because he's pretty much panning around the sky with his, let's say it's a mobile phone camera, he's pretty much panning around the sky and only just getting it in certain shots. Now, if I wanted to make that look as authentic as possible, I would have moments where I captured it clearly and moments where it was dogging me and I couldn't track it in the sky. Like I said, there are frames where he just gets a snippet of it and then it dogs out again out of the frame. The quality is exceptional. So that's all I'm going to say about it. It's
fair
like
enough.
most of these things I look at and I go, yeah, that's bupkis or that's really hokum. But this is an exceptional piece of footage.
I agree with you. I was very interested and intrigued. My wife and I looked at it. Hey, Rose, how you going? And she literally...
I looked over my shoulder then.
No, not quite.
No, I did.
But literally what happened was she looked at it and she said, well, come on, if you really saw something like that, and I'll put this to you, wouldn't you be speaking more, yelling out like, oh my, you know what you'd yell, all the euphemisms you'd yell.
I'd slam the brakes on and jump out of the car. But that's what this guy was trying to track it while he was driving. So keep that in mind. He's driving a vehicle.
Right.
He's holding up his phone, obviously illegally, to the sky through the windscreen. He's trying to track it and then it passes over the top of the car and it goes behind the car. So what does he do? He turns his head and the phone to over his left shoulder and he's trying to track it through the side window while the car's still moving down the road. And then he has that moment where he stops and he goes, you can see he stops the car because he knows he's driving, and he gets out of the car and he's trying to track it and everything happens. But like I said, if I was trying to fake that, I wouldn't do it through a windscreen of a car or in the manner that he captured that.
Yeah, fair enough. And so, guys, get on there, give that video a look, and let us know what you think about it. I think it's fantastic. I think it was really well done. Whether it's real or not, it's brilliantly done, and that alone should cause a little bit of query or intrigue in you. So take a look and see what's going on with that. Well, we will move on right now, and I will say that we have a guest in the studio. Mark is here, and Mark is going to talk to us about his experiences going from the 60s, I guess, forward.
Yeah.
In the area of Pine Gap, or what is now known as Pine Gap. But he will get into that in a little bit. What I'm going to do for you right now, what we're going to do for you, is we're going to play a little audio file.
Now,
and this audio file, Clint, you can
no.
take everybody through it. No, go for it.
I was just going to say, when we made the decision to do tonight's show on Pine Gap, I went through the interweb to see as much information as I could, especially on YouTube in regards to Pine Gap.
Right.
Five. Only five. 5 articles on YouTube in reference to Pine Gap, and out of those 5, this was the only one that I could use.
Interesting.
So this is a little snippet of the gentleman who helped design Pine Gap and create it and sell it to the Australians. This is a little snippet of him being interviewed and openly admitting that he lied to the Australian government.
But they might release them in exchange for Israelis. Once that exchange is made...
I first came to the United States 2 years ago with a story about Iran. I brought that story here to CNN, the world's largest cable news network.
To get the Arabs freed from Israel in return for freedom for the Americans. No! You would only get them free.
The thing that struck me first about this place was how quickly stories were turned around. As a journalist, I've made mistakes turning around stories too quickly. In 1968, I wrote a story about Pine Gap. I got it wrong. I believe what my government told me.
They tell me what to do. They tell me what to read and how to read it.
Down to Washington. And on the first day there, the CIA is being asked to give some answers. Robert Gates has been nominated by the President to take over as Director of the Central Intelligence Agency.
Red ribbon. Firing battery here.
This is the closest we'll ever get to the leaders of the organization behind Pine Gap.
You raise your right hand. You, Robert M. Gates, solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
You may be seated.
I am deeply honored to have been nominated by the President to the position of Director of Central Intelligence. The President's instructions to me when he offered the position were direct and clear. You remain the eyes and ears of the free world. You are the tripwire. He told me that he wants his intelligence unvarnished, the good and the bad. The nation can be proud of its intelligence services, and if confirmed, I would
A
be
Senate
proud
Committee
to
on
serve with
Intelligence is investigating the CIA's actions with the National Security Council at the White House. Victor Marchetti was the Special Assistant to the Director of the CIA and was one of the men behind the Pine Gap Agreement.
We had already developed electronic satellites for picking up all kinds of radio signals and other emissions. It was just put a stationary satellite up there, the one that orbits with the Earth, some 20-some thousand miles above the Earth, and make it like a vacuum cleaner. Just suck up every conceivable thing that you, from microwave, or anything that, on any frequency that may be of value, just suck it up and then send it down with a pencil beam to a down station, such as the place at Pine Gap, and then process it and see what you can learn. So Australia just happened to be there. Australia is a secure environment because we're allies with the Australians and very close on military and intelligence matters of mutual concern. So that would be a good down station. And of course, the satellite, which was actually over Borneo, the original one, would be that would be well in range of eastern Siberia and northern China. From the very beginning, once they get the...
He was a close friend and CIA colleague of Marchetti's who entered Australia in 1966 to clear the way for the establishment of Pine Gap.
This looks good, and there's a place there, up there at Alice Springs. That would be a good location.
The operative's papers did not reveal he was from the CIA.
Everything makes sense. Our contractor, who's going to make the satellite for us, and that everything fits with him, and well, now it's about time we start talking to the Aussies. So it would start at the intelligence working level. The people working on this would begin to discuss it with their opposite number in Australia.
Did the Aussies, as you called them, know what was going on at that time?
Oh, sure. Of course. I told you. I explained to you, as the project would begin to develop, the Australians would be brought into it.
Were they told exactly what?
Yeah, they'd be told what we're going to do and why it would be of interest to them and of value to them. Now, nobody tells anybody everything. I mean, it's the nature of the business is that you never completely trust anyone and they never completely trust you. I mean, that's just the nature of the business. And there are cases where there will be mutual operations going on, and not only will the CIA be withholding information from their allies, they'll be trying to recruit some of the people in their among their allies to work for them.
What was the aim of Pine Gap?
Primary aim was to collect electronic information on Soviet missile activities in eastern Siberia and Chinese missile activities, everything from testing to operational systems on the Chinese and northern China, and any other related military information that could be picked up, or any other general intelligence information. Since one of the capabilities was to intercept microwave transmissions. So there were a lot of things that could be acquired that would fit into various intelligence requirements that were established for the CIA.
See, I was told that it was a space research facility joint facilities.
So that was the cover.
That's what all Australians were told.
That was the cover for it at the time. At the time, it was considered a very sensitive operation. Not so much to keep the Soviets or the Chinese from knowing what we were doing, because obviously the Soviets are very good at this. They can see that thing up there. They know what it is, and so they can put two and two together and say, well, the Americans have figured out a new way of spying on us. We got to, if we don't already have it, we better get one too, so we can use it on them. And so the Soviets know what's going on. They don't say anything. I mean, that's the way the game is. The main reason for the secrecy was to keep the Australian and the American public ignorant, particularly the Australian public, because Australians are perceived by the Americans to be a little odd about some of these things. They sometimes don't appreciate the great threat that the Soviet Union and China and communism pose to the United States and the rest of the free world, including Australia. So we have to, like a big brother to a little brother, we have to protect them from themselves. What the Australian public doesn't know won't hurt them. I mean, there are very few things that are really so sensitive that you have to keep them secret from your own people. So by nobody knowing what's going on in Australia, and of course we're not going to say anything.
So it was a conspiracy
American public
to allow unhindered the gathering of intelligence and military secrets on Australian soil.
So they just put up a cover story and say it's a space project of some sort. Everybody knows that Australia was involved in our manned orbiting of the Earth and the moon launches and all that, and the whole NASA thing. It's a good, has a very good position, geographically speaking, for this.
You were telling a lie.
Well, yes, that's what cover is.
Can I just say what the Australian public don't need to know won't hurt them? That's what he said.
Well, the fact of the matter is, as far as the United States is concerned, that's their modus operandi with their own people.
Oh, you'd know.
Absolutely.
I know you'd know.
Oh, good grief. It's the way of the world as far as intelligence is concerned. So what you basically have is you have a situation where the United States, from a military standpoint, needed something, and they went about getting it the way they normally go about getting it, by lies and deceit.
Could you not hear that man jump all over his word every time he had to say something? Like, he couldn't lie straight in bed if he tried.
Well, that's the way of the world. So, as we were saying, we have a special guest here in the studio with us, and we wanted this person, Mark, we wanted Mark to listen
Welcome,
to
Mark.
that. And welcome.
Clint, Mess, how you going?
Oh, we're doing really well.
Cool.
Doing really, really well. So, what we wanted to do is we wanted Mark to be able to listen to that audio clip before him telling us how he felt about what he went through up at Pine Gap and the things that he saw up there. So the first thing we'll ask you, Mark, is based upon that audio clip, how do you feel about what you just heard?
I find the gentleman was, how can you say, not telling the truth? Misinformation? Because I remember back in the 70s there was a massive outcry. It was in the newspapers all over Pine Gap how it was a nuclear target. So it wasn't hidden from the Australian people. The Australian people knew it was there. And that was around the time Gough Whitlam was leader of the Labor Party as well, interestingly enough.
Now, that was when he was sacked too by the Queen.
Yeah, funny that, wasn't it?
Well, right at that exact time.
It's a little interesting that up until that time, Gough was wanting to get rid of all the American bases out of Australia, and Pine Gap was one of the ones right on the hit list. And he was right up the top there. They wouldn't stop talking about it. So where he's saying that they were saying to the Australian people, oh, it's just NASA, it's a satellite for space exploration.
Yeah, space research facility.
Yeah, which was really, I don't know where they're coming from. I mean, they must think that some of us don't have long memories, because I certainly do. And there's sort of a, how can you put it? When Gough got the bullet, it was all supposed to be the Governor-General and the Queen, but Pine Gap was tied right up inside that, and there was a lot of innuendos in regards to the CIA was involved because Gough was messing around with too many of the American bases. particularly the one over on the Northwest Cape in Western Australia, because that used to target or send orders to all the nuclear submarines to where to launch their missiles down across Asia and out through China and all through there. And he was also messing around over in that area. So poor old Gough stuck his finger in where it wasn't really wanted, I think, and that was really why he got the bullet in the end, because he was doing nasty things.
Hang on a second. When you say nasty things, not for the Australia public, but for the American interests.
Well, I think he was actually trying to tell the Australian people what was going on, but without doing it, if that makes any sense. But he didn't do a very good job of it. Now, look, those stories went on for years and years and years in the 70s between why Gough Whitlam got the sack. And the CIA kept coming up all the time, and Pine Gap kept coming up all the time. So you don't have innuendos like that for no reason. You know, they were leaked out to the media, and the media made a lot out of them. So, but Pine Gap is a rather interesting place, to say the least. Everyone at the moment on the website sees Pine Gap as being the one out on the Tanami Road in the Tanami Desert. But in actual fact, back then, the Pine Gap was one on the McDonald Ranges, which is still there today, but it's unmanned, unfortunately.
So, Mark, can I just interrupt? So, are you actually saying that the original Pine Gap base that was out at the McDonald Ranges is still sitting there, and the one that everybody knows about now in the Tanami Desert is the second Pine Gap that was Pine Gap 2.0?
Well, see, the one out in the desert, no one knew it was out there, not as far as I knew at least anyway. There was a few people did, but not significant amounts. Everyone that lived in Alice Springs, there's a very, very big American community. There's a certain section of Alice Springs where all the houses were bought up just for the American servicemen that were working out on the Tanami Desert base. So everyone sort of in Alice Springs knew what was going on, which is really quite funny actually, but no one else really outside of Alice Springs knew what was going on, if that makes any sense. And the base...
Mark?
Oh, sorry.
Hello.
I lost you then.
That's okay.
This voice appeared in my head.
I'm sitting next to you, so just turn to your right. What year was this?
Oh, gee whiz, hang on.
Take your time.
Yeah, we're going back to the late 90s.
Okay. Yep.
So probably...
92?
No, late 90s.
Late, sorry.
Yeah, 98.
98, yep.
Yeah. And so... and we used to talk to all the American servicemen when we used to see them, and you wouldn't bump into them that often.
Who's we?
Me and my wife.
Okay. So
sorry.
When you're out socialising...
Hang on, I've got to stick it in my wife here nicely. My ex-wife.
Yep.
Sorry, guys. Yeah, we're out socialising.
Yep.
You meet them, they never say very much. They're always very, very quiet. And they would never actually say
what they were doing
out there.
Well, I don't believe they were allowed to.
Well, they probably weren't, but they wouldn't even tell you they were working out the Tanami Desert Road.
Well, from what I understand, now you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I look at it is, the fact is, the head of that base, what we know as Pine Gap, or what we're calling Pine Gap, or Pine Gap 2.0, is an American. They are usually military. And the name of that person isn't revealed until after they've left the post. So it's a secret appointment.
Look, everything about Pine Gap is just... How can you put it? It's not... There's a lot of innuendos around Pine Gap too. Misinformation that I see. That sort of thing, from my perspective, is a perfect example to keep people guessing what's actually going on out there.
So you believe a lot of the things going on out there is like a blind?
Oh, absolutely, definitely.
I know that, and I have actually met him before, Kim Beazley, who at the time was the Minister for Defence. He took a trip out there to do an inspection and did not get full access.
No, they wouldn't let him. I remember that.
Yes.
Because I did read about it.
And he was the Minister for Defence.
Yeah. No, they weren't going to let him in there. No one gets in that place. No. But the interesting
it's American soil, technically, isn't it? Technically?
Technically, yeah. But we're supposed to be partners with it.
No, but if it's an American compound or American soil, therefore it's just like an embassy.
Well, yeah.
It's basically the United States of America within Australia.
But
therefore they have jurisdiction, and they can let in who they want, and if they don't want you in there, you're not getting in. It doesn't matter who you are.
But the funny thing was, back in 98 or thereabouts, right, the one out in the Tanami Desert, I think it had 3 radomes a house and a double car garage. That was it. That was all there was. There was nothing else out there. And if you go out onto Google, interestingly enough, they seem to have changed their maps a little bit since way back then, but you used to be able to zoom right in on it, and you could see the outlines of the 3 radomes very plainly, the house and the a double garage. And that was all that was there. There was nothing else out there.
And this was the one at
This is the one out in the Tanami Range.
Okay. Yep.
Right, the one on the McDonald Range, the Tanami Desert, the one out on the McDonald Range is still there. And that was being operated in the 60s and the 70s by personnel, and probably the 80s as well. But as computers improved, eventually they took the personnel out of there, and all it was is just a computer relaying information now, and it just transmits it wherever it sends it to. So it was, as far as I know, I haven't been out there for a few years now, but as far as I know, it was still gathering information, and it just sends it straight off, and there's nobody actually looking after the place.
Okay.
So it was quite simple, but that's sort of...
But that was back then.
Well, that was back then. There's a lot of...
It's a different world now.
There's a lot of furfies running around. You don't know what's the truth and what's not the truth.
Well, Mark, tonight we're interested in your experience.
Okay.
What you've experienced.
All right.
So run us through it.
Let's go through it. Let's just start off on one part. Right. I knew some gentlemen in what's known as Power and Water in Alice Springs. And they take care, obviously, of all the electricity for the area, plus the water for the area. And they were telling me about some gentlemen that turned up many years ago. These gentlemen were long-time Power and Water workers, and so they're just about 30-year workers. So they've been there a long time. And when they were building the base out at the Tanami, they came and said, "Look, we're building a base, blah, 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 blah," so to speak, not in straight-out terms, but we need so much electricity.
And what were you doing, Mark?
Supplied. Well, I wasn't out there then. I was a bit young. I was only about 14.
Okay.
But at the time, I was working with Power and Water.
Yep.
Okay, so I was I knew these gentlemen, and they weren't lying to me. And being within the organisation, you know who's...
Legit?
Yeah, seriously. And they were speaking in regards to these gentlemen that turned up, and they wanted a certain amount of electricity supplied to them. And
now this is in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, okay. Right. Now there's no wires out there. This is a serious desert out there, man. Right. Anyway, they said, "Look, we need all this power delivered to us," and they didn't give me the exact amount.
1.21 gigawatts.
Oh yeah, some staggering amount. And the blokes from Power and Water just laughed at them and said, "You got to be joking. We can't supply that. We just run diesel generators to run Alice Springs," which is all there was and still is. So these two gentlemen went away, and then a few weeks later, another couple of gentlemen turned up, again, in suits, no uniforms or anything like that. And they said, "Look, see, we can't supply the electricity. We're looking for so much water."
It's a desert.
Now we're in a desert. Okay, and the amount of water they were looking for was just phenomenal. And these guys nearly fell over when they asked, because all the water comes out of the Todd River around there. It's all in bores, so they've got to suck it up out of the Todd and filter it, and then goes into the town drinking water. And the amount of water these guys wanted was just phenomenal. And they said, "We can't supply that. We're a little country town, You show us where the water is, we'll supply it." But they couldn't. So the guy said, "Okay, no worries. We'll go and sort it out ourselves." So anyway, so that was the end of that. That was the end of that story. So they never contacted the Power and Water again for electricity or water or any of that sort of stuff. So meanwhile, the base has been built out there. But if you have a look on Google, you'll see there's no power lines going out there. And if you go back to the late 90s, when there was only 3 radomes, a house and a double garage out there, there was no diesel generator stacks, so there's no exhaust stacks. There's nothing to show you where they're getting all this power from.
Mark, I'm going to stop you for a second and ask you this question, because I'm sure I'm not the only person that's pondering on this right now.
Stacks, sorry, exhaust pipes.
Yeah, no. What I was going to say, power now. Yeah?
Power now?
Yeah. Do they have power now?
Well, that's the interesting thing.
Because I had a look.
Well,
I had a look
that's
too,
where
and
we-
I can't see anything.
No.
So what are they powering it with?
We'll see.
Yeah, go on.
Bear
Mark.
with me.
Go on,
I'm
Mark.
getting there.
No, you got all the time in the world tonight,
See,
mate.
I suppose I'm lucky in some respects. When I look at something, I take a picture of it in my mind. And it doesn't matter how long it stays there. I can still see that picture that I saw 30 years ago inside my head, and it's as clear as the day I put it in there. So if I was looking at a computer monitor and there's a particular picture I want to take a look at, well, then it will go in and it will stay there, right? Now, I remember that picture only too well back in the late 90s. And as I said, I was looking for exhaust pipes, I'm looking for water plants, I'm looking for all these things. There's nothing there except this house.
Well,
okay?
energy has to come in and energy has to come out.
Well, that's the thing, and this is where we're getting to. Now, apparently some other, and I can't remember who these gentlemen were, but there was somebody that was working out there, and apparently this facility goes down 5 floors underground, but you would never know, of course.
Now, go for it, Mark. Go on.
Okay, now this may seem, this was legit. This was seriously from guys that have been out there. I can't remember now offhand what this gentleman was doing. It was just like a passing comment, and I didn't take a lot of notice of it at the time. But then after looking at the maps and starting to study the place a little bit more, it makes a lot of sense. And then you put together the fact that they've been to Power and Water to say, hey, can you supply us this? Power and Water said no. Can you supply us this much water? Power and Water said no. Right? In the pictures from 98, there are no diesel generator sets on the surface. Okay, there's no exhaust pipes on the surface. So you've got to put 2 and 2 together and say, well, how are they producing this massive amount of electricity? So it's kind of obvious, really, when you think about it. So,
But what you're actually about to say, and what you're about to at least
Allude to.
Allude
is
to would be the
something
better
that is
word.
not allowed
pretty much
here
so. Yeah.
in this country, known as Australia.
Yeah.
Oh, very interesting.
But you wouldn't know that,
So we're talking nuclear.
basically. Yeah.
It has to be.
It's the only way it could
Because
be.
there's no water, there's no energy going in, and there's no energy coming out.
That's right. And that's the whole problem with the place. And that's, as I said to you, I've still got that picture in my mind of back in 98. There was nothing there. And you're going, well, where's the energy come to run this place from? And if you look at the place now, you could probably see a few buildings possibly that would have generator sets in them. But the phenomenal amount of power that place would be using, you'd need some very, very big generators to run it.
I went onto Facebook today, and in Facebook where you got that little window at the top where you can just type something in and it'll bring it up. I typed in Pine Gap. It was just Pine Gap, sorry. It's Pine Gap. And what came up was a Aboriginal community Facebook page that were looking to shut down Pine Gap because of its nuclear threat, because of its nuclear waste that it produces. So I've actually found a Facebook page today of an Aboriginal community out there that is advocating the exact same narrative that you're telling us right now.
It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, if they're starting complaining about it and saying, hey, where's this waste coming from? Because even if you look on Google Maps, it's very difficult to see anything at that place because it's so flat. There's nothing there. And you wonder, well, where is everything? I'm looking at the fact that it's gone underground 5 floors, and the fact that you've got the artesian basin running around. There's your perfect water supply for running nuclear energy. Constant, it's there all the time. And the fact the size of the base is today, I couldn't believe. It's an amazing base now.
I've seen lots of articles in regards to boring, deep ground military base boring equipment. So when you say it's 5 floors down, and that was back in the late 90s.
Well, yeah, back then.
Well, these days it could be 50 floors down.
Oh, you wouldn't know.
You wouldn't know.
No, you wouldn't know.
And the technology they've got these days to bore out magnificent, architecturally sound tunnels and rooms. I did see another article that was talking about another base in the UK that measures up in an alignment with Pine Gap.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Now, the mathematical equation that this gentleman decided to break down the difference in distance, and he broke it down and broke it down and broke it down, and it came to an audio frequency. Funnily enough, the difference came down to an audio frequency which was 60 hertz, and allegedly the 60 hertz is the perfect resonance inside a deep underground cavern that acts as a radio telescope to amplify listening equipment.
Okay, there's a chances that I can understand that and agree with you there. The only problem is...
But it was interesting, Mark, because the gentleman had gone, okay, what's the distance between Pine Gap and this other base in this straight line on the opposite side of the world? He broke down what the distance was and then broke it down and broke it down, and it came to this figure, which was the exact resonance frequency that was needed to generate or pull in sound down underground at this particular location. So it was really, really cool.
Well, I can understand where you're coming from with that, but then that opens up another can of worms.
Or just keep ripping them open, Mark.
Yeah, well, that's the problem. If you keep bringing them open like that, where's it going to...
Well, that's what we
end up. You know what I'm saying?
But Mark, that's why we're here every Saturday night, isn't it, Matt?
That is literally the reason we are here. We are here because we have to explore these things and find out what's going on. So that's what we're doing now. It's very interesting. I guess this is what we call synchronicity, because I'm looking at the net right now, and I just brought up a story that's dated March the 4th, 2016 at 5:18 p.m. our time, and the title of the story is Pine Gap, Nautilus Institute explores Alice Springs Joint Defense Facility.
You just found that now?
Literally.
Okay.
My favorite word.
Do you like the way they say joint?
Yeah, but you see, that means something totally different, Mark.
It does. I know that. I'm being facetious.
No, I wasn't.
Well, anyway,
there's no joint. There's no responsibility shared. It's all their way or the highway. We know that.
What it basically says here, the article starts out, and the title of the article, or at least the headline underneath it, is, "It has a computer room the size of the Melbourne Cricket Ground."
That wouldn't surprise me in the least.
So if you've got a computer room the size of the Melbourne Cricket Ground and you cannot see it above ground, you must need some pretty big equipment to dig that out underground. So you're talking about a room the size of the Melbourne Cricket Ground under the desert.
Yeah, that look.
Just let that sink in for a minute.
But what you're talking about there wouldn't surprise me in the least, because as I said, I knew it went down 5 floors because that gentleman that told me that he's worked on it out there, right? But the other thing is, because of the growth in this place, and this is the thing that still astounds me, is the growth with all those sheds out there and new buildings, and the fact that there's a runway where you can land 3 B-52s on it. Why would you need a runway that big in the middle of a desert at a base that's only supposed to help space research? And why is it growing bigger and bigger? There must be a lot of space research going on out there.
Are you asking me, or are you rhetorically putting that question out there?
Well, I'm sort of putting that question out there. Because the one thing that gets me is the size of that runway. I mean, you could put 3 jumbo jets land on that all at the same time.
So, Mark, here we go. We're
going down another path, but it's going to bounce back again. Don't worry.
I know it will.
Because it's all tied in with the whole lot, because the little snippets of information they give you or that you can at least work out over many years, does make a big picture eventually.
Sometimes they like to put the snippets out there and rub your nose in it too.
Oh yeah, don't worry about that too. I mean, that runway they've got out there could just be a total furphy. It's just there to make it look good. Hey, we've got this big runway. What's it for? Why have we got it here? Oh, are we fooling you? Nearly had to hit the dump switch then.
Yes, I know.
As I'm looking at this article, guys, I will tell you something, and it's very interesting to look at. I will have to show this to you, and I will put it up on the Facebook page, but the information here is quite phenomenal, considering the fact that it's a secret facility, including new photographs that were taken both from Google and other sources, including a Melbourne photographer, Christian Lemele Ruff. And it's very interesting to look at these things because they have some pretty good up-close photographs of what's going on there, buildings and bunkers and all kinds of things going on. I am going to put this up on the Facebook page while these guys continue to wax philosophic about Pine Gap. Now, the thing is, as I look at all of this, it's really, really funny because they also have pictures in this article of the signs: no through road joint defense facility, Pine Gap, prohibited area, turn around now. Mark, you were telling me earlier about a story of what they used to do when the facility was being built with the citizenry in and around Pine Gap. So how about going over that a little bit?
Yeah, that was actually fascinating. Back in the late 90s, the locals of Alice Springs were all invited to try and break into the defence base and actually get to the radomes if they could. So remember, we're back with only 3 radomes and 2 buildings. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, a lot of people actually did have a go at it over the years. They were invited every single year to have a go at break into this place, which is kind of interesting in itself when you think about it. That's a good way of testing security too. One gentleman actually made it right to the radomes and then they got him. But nobody else ever made it to the radomes. So everyone could have a go, whether that's probably not the truth today, but back then, yeah, they used to invite the locals to have a go at it.
I would assume that they would have a series of heat signature cameras set up all around the place, and if anything tripped over a certain temperature, they'd know you exactly where you were.
Yeah,
it wouldn't be a case of going out there with a camouflaged blanket and just hiding.
Oh no way. This one guy that got in there, he didn't tell anyone actually how he did it. They did have pictures of him right up against the radome, and so he actually did make it, but no one else ever made it in there. So that tells you how good the security is. So they're testing it all the time.
And it would be even better today.
Oh, yeah, it's really weird though. That's a funny statement, that, because you've got this base in the middle of no man's land and it sticks out like a sore thumb. You can't miss it. And you think, and Google comes in and zooms over the top. Not so you can see what it's doing, but over the years you can see how it's growing, which is, it's interesting in itself. There's a lot more than meets the eye.
I love it when you go look at something on Google and you know you're not supposed to see it because they've blurred out that square.
Yeah, that's a crack up. But do you know with early XP, when you went on there, XP actually, you could zoom in a lot closer than what you can now. Because I had XP when I zoomed in on it, and I zoomed right in on it. And now I can't.
You should have got some screen snaps.
I did in my head, unfortunately. I did in my head.
It's no good in your head, Mark.
Yeah, that was a bit of a blow, that one. But sometimes you look at things like this and you pick up information, but you don't take notice of it. It just goes into the memory bank and sits there. And it might sit there for 20 years, but you'll just keep picking up little snippets over the longer period of time, and you go in there every so often just to have a look. Just to see what's going on with the base. And they do allow you enough to see a little bit of what's going on, so...
Now, Mark, are you familiar with the Aurora craft?
Just fill me in with that again.
The Aurora craft is a high-altitude experimental aircraft that is allegedly now housed at Pine Gap. So when you say to me that they have these giant runways there, the Aurora craft would suit that kind of... facility pretty much down pat.
Okay,
but I would only suspect that Pine Gap would be used as a waypoint, not as a facility to house such a craft. It'd be more of a refueling place.
See, the trouble is you're putting a tag on Pine Gap as a research facility.
But it's not a research facility.
No, that's the thing, and that's what I was just about to say.
No, it's not.
I'm agreeing with you.
No.
It's not a research facility. It's much more than that.
No.
But it's not... I know what you're talking about with the Aurora. Okay, but to me that's almost like a bit of a furphy as well. Okay, that's another bit of misinformation out there. Because what that place is doing, and I'd love to be able to say what it's doing, but I can't because I'm not sure. Do you know what I mean?
No, actually, Mark, you can.
Yeah, but...
Because you don't actually...
There's no absolutes.
No, there's not, Mark, so say it.
But and my trouble is, I can't actually say what's on my mind, what I think it's doing, except for the fact that it's not a research facility.
You can share your opinion, Mark.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But
that's all Matt does.
We get our opinions and we put them out there. It's up for people to decide.
Literally, don't you? Literally.
Yes. My favorite word. It's up for people. It's for people to decide. We give them the information. They have to interpret it.
I can't... How can you say this? I don't have an opinion except on one that it's not a research facility. That much I'm 100% sure on. Okay? It's not a... an information gathering site anymore.
No.
It may have been used as that originally.
Well, you heard that snippet we played at the start.
Yeah.
I dare say at the start when it was sold to Australia, well, it was sold as a space facility that you guys can have a part in, and you know, it'll help you guys. And then they've moved across and then decided to make it a waypoint for gathering information from all around the world.
But look,
it evolves. The story, the myth evolves.
I'm going to tell you something a bit shifty here. I'm just not quite sure whether I should.
I love shifty.
Yeah, I know.
Go for broke.
Go for broke.
It's information. It is what it is. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, okay. I used to have a mate that was in Signals Corps in the Army, and he used to tell me some things occasionally, not very often. But, and this is why I'm trying to match this, right? Match the Army with Pine Gap, right? Or the new Pine Gap 2. Out at Watsonia Army Barracks, right? It is one of the main eavesdropping radio Army intelligence bases in Victoria. Okay, now you'd never know that by looking at the place, but I know for a fact that it is. All right,
it's right in the middle of a residential area. From
oh yeah, seriously, right. Now, as I said, I knew someone who worked in there, and you'd never know. He told me while he was in there was not one telephone, not one computer, there was not one conversation he could not listen to anywhere in the world. Right? Now that's in the middle of the suburbs of Melbourne.
I know.
And you would never know that.
I know.
Why would they have Pine Gap trying to tell us it's a listening station?
Okay, here's a better question. If you've got a listening station like that in suburban Melbourne, why build a listening station in the middle of the desert?
Well, that's
with
exactly.
No power, no water,
That's
unless you wanted nobody to see
what's going on.
What's going on.
As much as I hate to say it, you know what this reminds me of? Area 51. Sorry, guys, but that's what it looks like. Do you know what I'm saying? Because it's got the same stigma as what Area 51 has got round it.
Yeah, well, Area 51 is a real facility. The Groom Lake facility definitely exists, but what everybody thinks is going on there is going on somewhere else.
Yeah.
At 52 and 53?
Easily.
Easily.
So now, wait a minute. Now, didn't you find a little bit of a snippet from Stephen Greer
I did.
stating that something else was going on out there in the desert?
He did mention Pine Gap, along the lines of what Mark was saying. He did mention Pine Gap. I will try and dig that up for us for next week.
Okay.
And we'll only touch on it for like 2 minutes or whatever, but I'll dig that up for next week.
Yeah, well, that'd be fascinating, because there's a lot more going on out there than what they're telling us.
Stephen Greer, Mark, I don't know if you heard the interview we did with, we played with him a couple of weeks ago, but he's working hand in hand right now with the French government to bring forth the disclosure of interdimensional, what's the word I'm looking for, Matt?
Beings, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
So he's working hand in hand with the French government, and he did bring up Pine Gap as a facility that was there for that purpose.
Yeah, well, look, what that place is out there for wouldn't surprise me. Not where it is, because it's in the middle of no man's land, right? They don't need a facility out there to track satellites.
Or 1,000 people working there.
Yeah, and that's that's the other thing too. The American enclave that used to be in Alice Springs was very big. It wasn't small. And you're thinking to yourself, well, hang on, and this is, I'm going back to 98, I'm thinking, well, hang on, how can so many people fit into these two little buildings that are out there?
So that's nearly, what's that, 18 years ago?
Yeah.
Well, looking at the latest satellite imagery that's coming from Google, this place has expanded exponentially over the years. And I believe now it's about 1,200 people working there, of which 80% are American.
Well, then, where are they all staying?
Interesting point.
Because they had their own enclave in Alice. They can't buy up any more land in Alice.
12,000 people commuting from Alice Springs.
Only 1,200.
1,200 people commuting from Alice Springs to Pine Gap every day.
No,
really?
well, see, there's the funny thing, right? They had all their families in Alice, but you never saw them driving out of town. You never saw them on the Tanami Road. So how were they getting from Alice out there? because I used to travel up that road all the time, and I knew what traffic on that road was.
Oh, great. Area 51, the Groom Lake facility, what this said is if people worked there and they lived in and around Henderson, Nevada, northern Nevada, and everything like that, they actually went into McCarran Airport in Las Vegas, and they were transported from there underground and above ground in some cases to the facility. Therefore, if you are talking about at least 5 stories down, one of the things I would say they have built are maglev trains. I would say they have all kinds of technology under there so that the people that actually work there never have to go above ground.
For anyone that doesn't know what a maglev train is, I know we talk about this type of stuff like we know what we're saying, like we know, like we invented it sometimes. We should talk about like we invented it. A maglev train is a train that doesn't have a track, but it runs parallel with a magnetic track, but it hovers.
Yep.
And it's high speed and it's underground.
Well, Matt hit the nail on the head, and because I didn't realise that either. There's all these Americans living in Alice, but you never see them going up the highway.
Well, that's why I asked you.
And you never see them going down the Tanami road. So how are they getting out there? And they weren't being choppered out there.
No.
So
if that were the case, you'd hear the choppers.
Question.
So therefore, if you're going to build facilities, you're going to build facilities. And underground facilities means you can have housing underground, you can have transportation underground, people can easily get to and from their work areas and back home. And the other thing that's very important, being that it is supposedly secret and you have to sign confidentiality agreements, they can be monitored.
Because it's just funny, because you said that, it's just dawned on me all these years later that, yeah, hang on, how are they getting out there?
Well, that's what I said. Like,
yeah, it was perfect.
1,200 people going to work on a Monday morning in Alice Springs.
So how are they getting out there?
Would you not see 1,200 people catching a communal bus?
Yeah, but
or buses.
That was the funny thing, right, about when I was travelling up and down that road. You never used to see any military trucks, jeeps.
So hang on
nothing.
a second. So let's just reiterate: no helicopters.
Nope.
No planes.
Nope.
No trucks.
Nope.
No buses.
Nope.
No cars.
Nothing.
But 1,200 people are getting to work there every day.
Yeah, funny that, isn't it? What does that say?
Well,
how are they getting there?
No, what it says is they're extremely efficient
Yeah, seriously.
At hiding their secrets.
hiding this.
And actually, that one I've got to give you 100 points for, because
You're welcome.
that's what they were doing.
You're
back
welcome.
then. Yeah, no, seriously, it's brilliant, because that's what was happening back in '98, and nobody knew about it. Yeah. Everyone accepted the fact the American enclave was there. Everyone knew the Tanami base was out there, but no one bothered to think about how everyone's getting from here to there.
Now, I did watch an interview with Kim, that interview I talked about with Kim Beazley, and Kim Beazley went out to the base, and the interviewer said to him, there's 1,000 people working here. This was back then. There's 1,000 people working. Where are they? And Kim Beazley's looking around the sky, and he's looking around the distance, and he looks back at the interviewer. He looks back at the interviewer, and he goes, well, they're all here. They're all around us. They're all around us. And that they were his words. They are all around us.
Yeah.
But you couldn't see them.
Yeah.
No, they're under you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, literally, they're everywhere, which is, it's an amazing place, though, really. But we actually, I think that's a really good point, though, just that one. And if you, well, we won't go down that path, but if you really wanted to find out, you just go and camp in the American enclave for a little while and actually follow a few people and see how they're getting from the enclave in Alice Springs to the base. I wouldn't suggest you do it, of course.
Matt will. If Matt had the money and the time, he'd be down there, don't worry. He'd infiltrate quite easily.
No. There's a person who used to work at that facility that actually came out and wrote a book on what was going on there. And he said that it had to be vetted with his handlers in Virginia. And the book did come out. So it's not a matter of what was going on there, whether it was secret or something like that. A lot of things secret go on. Governments do not necessarily tell the population everything that is going on because it's a need-to-know basis. We all know that, especially if you listen to this show. But the fact of the matter is a lot of things that it's all compartmentalized. So all of those 1,200 people that are working there have no idea about everything that is going on. It is always going to be that way. It is a supposed secret facility, but you have to allow for the fact that, hey, work has to be done. It is governments doing this kind of thing. Black projects will come into it and everything like that, but it doesn't really happen that much down here in Australia. And for Australia, this is one of the enigmas down here. This base, this facility. But, like you would say, if you go out to the Alice, or if you go to Ulara or something like that, if you were going to go to the Rock, to Uluru, the first thing I noticed, and I will say this out loud, Uluru, in my opinion, from a spiritual standpoint, is a blind. It is a rock that is there. If you really want to know where the energy is, head a little bit to your right.
Are you talking about the Olgas?
And into the Olgas and
The Olgas.
Judah.
I've been to both. Uluru was like, I don't know, it was boring. When I say boring, there was art, there was history, there was people, but there was no...
Commercialised.
Yes, thank you, Mark. It was commercialised.
Yeah,
it was commercialised.
just
And there's the option, you have the option to climb the rock or not climb the rock. And they ask you not to...
Exactly,
The
you're not
people there
supposed to.
not to climb the rock.
Yes.
But when you went to the Olgas, it had the same energy as Hanging Rock in Victoria. It was very, you could feel the
energy was tangible.
Thank you.
It's there. It's a tangible energy when you're there, and you notice the difference. When you go to both places, there is no comparison as far as most people are concerned, at least the people I've talked to. We are at a point where we're coming to have to wind this up for this week, and as I said to these guys, before you know it, you look down at your watch and wow.
Wow.
There you have it.
Mark,
And
you were worried about filling 10 minutes.
Yeah, no, that was cool. Sorry, that was great
This
night.
is the thing. Well, that's really great, Mark.
good.
I would love to get you back in again because there's a few other points I would love to go over that we didn't get to this night. So in the coming weeks, we might get together and do this again and get more information out on Pine Gap. I'm going to put up this article that appeared at news.com.au on our Facebook page because I think it's pertinent as far as it is literally, it was released, 2 days ago? The information there, the pictures that are in this article will give you guys out there a little bit of an idea of how big this base has become. There's still a lot of propaganda in this article. When you read it, you can just see through it immediately. The way the pictures are taken, where they're taken from, you can tell that this person was allowed in at certain areas to take certain pictures from certain angles. That's fair enough. At least the information can get out there, and people will start to ask more questions. So, we'll call this Pine Gap Part 1.
Mark, thank you very much for sharing all that with us tonight. You are one of the only people I know that's ever been there.
Oh, really?
Well, if other people have been there, they haven't talked to us yet.
Yeah, well, look, when you're running around the desert for sort of 12 months, going to a lot of communities, you get to see a lot of things out there. And that just happened to be one of the, you meet a lot of people, you get to know a lot of stories, and you can work out which ones are true and which ones aren't. But look, it's been fantastic being with you guys tonight. It was a really good night and a good discussion. I hope we've opened something up for some people out there to think about.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mark. Matt, next week?
Oh gosh, we're gonna have to think about that. I will tell you right now, I am in email contact with somebody from the Vatican Observatory.
Oh yes, you told me about that, and I'm very, very excited.
Yeah, that should be very, very interesting. It won't come up necessarily next week, but being that this person now is traveling hither and thither, and I mean literally, as in I'm getting emails from Florida, and they're in an airport on their way somewhere else.
What can you just say his name?
Guy Consolmagno.
Thank you.
Monsignor Consolmagno, who is the new head of the Vatican Observatory. We're trying to get something together with him so he can actually talk to us about what the Vatican Observatory actually does, because it actually does do science. Even though the telescope might be named Lucifer, that doesn't mean there's something sinister going on.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Why would they do that?
Oh, who knows? It's just one of those things.
It's another enigma. It's another mystery wrapped in a mystery.
It's one of those things you have to deal with. But until next week, guys, thanks for listening tonight. We will put a few things up on the Facebook page, so definitely stay tuned for all of that kind of stuff. Take very good care of yourselves, and we will see you again for another edition of Beyond 3D. Take care.
Just because you haven't experienced it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.